Yo, what's up, Quirk Chronicles crew? Today, we're diving into an epic what if. What if Deku awakened a precognition quirk? This one's packed with intense moments, high-stakes decisions, and Deku redefining heroism like never before. So, smash that like button, share this with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories. Alright, let's dive into this future-seeing adventure. There were moments when Izuku hated his quirk. He hated raising his hand for every question in every class, giving perfect answers every time. He hated getting perfect scores on every quiz and worksheet, prompting the teachers to praise his academic excellence. He hated seeing Kaken's simmering anger and Yaoyorozu's crushed, defeated expression every time he outdid them both. They both competed with him to answer the most questions and score the highest on their first-day pop quizzes. But neither of them could compete with someone who knew the answers before the teacher had even handed out the papers. It had been like that for no small part of his childhood. He had always hated knowing that people will die or villains will escape, and thinking that if he had made an anonymous call to a hero agency, none of that would have happened. He hated hiding his scratches and burns from his mom, hated avoiding beaches and swimming pools, hated wearing long-sleeve shirts even when it was hot outside. He hated wondering what kind of house they could have if he had used his quirk to win the lottery, how often they could have Katsudan, how much more time his mom would have for him since she wouldn't have to work 2 jobs. Over the years, he had considered taking those paths, risking discovery of his quirk to get him and his mother better lives. But every time, the mere thought of changing what he saw gave him a headache, as though he was ramming his head against a brick wall. So, he kept his head down, kept his scars hidden, and tried not to look too closely at news of people dying. Of all those events, of all the pain and suffering he had endured, of all the squalor of their dingy 2-bedroom apartment, the instant ramen and bean soup, secondhand clothes and faulty AC units, of all the attention currently heaped on him, nothing made him more seriously consider pushing through that headache, finding any other possible future than what was about to transpire as he slipped into an alleyway just outside UA after a training session with Aizawa on Thursday evening, with loud, angry footsteps at his heels. Bakugo Katsuki had fallen into Wonderland. It was the only explanation for how fucked up the world had become the moment he woke up in a hospital bed in Recovery Girl's office, with almost enough gauze plastered over his face to smother him in his sleep. The old hag had told him he had broken his nose and had gotten a concussion. That alone was impossible. He was Katsuki. Nothing could hurt him. He could take a long walk off a high-rise building and blast his way down without a bruise. If something flew at him, he could blast it out of the air. If anyone tried to hurt him, they'd fucking die. As if that wasn't fucked up enough, when he numbly asked how the hell he had wound up with a broken nose, the hag had slathered a metric fuckton of putrid icing atop the shit cake. Fucking Deku had punched him. One punch from Deku, scrawny, pathetic, quirkless Deku, and he had a broken nose, a concussion, and the living daylights knocked out of him. Not possible. When he bolted upright, dizziness hit him like a truck, but he struggled through it, staggering to his feet through spite against the stupid world that had dared bring him low. With a gentle push of her cane, Recovery Girl knocked him back in bed, gave him a disgusting kiss on the forehead, and all but shoved one of her gummy bears down his throat. While strength returned to his numb body, he caught flashes of what had happened up until he had blacked out, going up against Deku, racing into the building, finding him with his back turned, nowhere to run, no one to get in his way, no one to make him hold back and take it easy on the hero wannabe. A flash of green, hollow eyes staring through him as a white-gloved fist appeared, as if drawn out of a magician's hat, right in front of his face. The whole scene had a dreamlike unreality to it, like a nightmare that seemed laughably absurd even as it sent a chill up his spine. Recovery Girl kept him there until the end of the day, by which time it was too late to reassert his place at the top of the classroom. The school had evidently told his parents about the whole thing. Since both his parents had come to pick him up, his old hag of a mom shouted at him for being reckless and getting himself hurt on the second day, but the words had no bite to them, and that somehow stung more, like he was too weak to take her anger and disappointment, too fragile after being one-upped by the weakest kid in the whole school. Katsuki let himself simmer in silence, too exhausted and shell-shocked for real anger. The next morning, Katsuki hadn't even remembered what had happened until he looked in the mirror. Purple and black splotches covered half his face. A trembling finger brought to his nose leapt away as pain shot through the sensitive cartilage. The memories came flooding back, and this time, he had the strength for anger. His hand crashed palm first into the mirror. Beads of nitroglycerin sweat popped, shattering the mirror into 100 tinkling shards. His mom ran up the steps and screamed at him. He screamed back. They fired salvos of swear words, each more explicit and bombastic than the last. The booms and cracks of their clashing voices turning the tiny, glass-covered bathroom into a war zone. By the end, Katsuki was grounded for a week and grinning like a maniac. He was back. You wouldn't know what hit it. By the end of the day, he'd be back at the top of the food chain. His enthusiasm died a slow and ugly death in class that day. To kick off his absolutely horrible day, their creepy homeless teacher went over yesterday's combat training, giving everyone specific pointers on how to improve. While Katsuki greatly enjoyed the fact his face was awesome enough to break 2 of Deku's fingers, he did not enjoy getting lectured in front of the entire class on how he was a jackass for charging head first into an unknown situation and getting himself taken out without alerting his teammate. That wasn't his fault. He was up against fucking Deku. Deku wasn't supposed to be able to do anything, and the quivering lump of jelly he had for a teammate should have been just as useless. It wasn't his fault the universe decided to turn itself upside down. First period was modern art history, an awkward subject for Katsuki, given how Aldera Junior High never touched it, and he had blown it off as a waste of time. Midnight's first move was to explain that they studied it to better understand how heroes influence artistic media, which seemed like a stretch to Katsuki, but given it was a requisite course and he wouldn't settle for anything less than top grades, he resolved to memorize every word of their textbooks. He was already 5 chapters ahead by Wednesday, having plowed through the book the first chance he got, and yet, he found himself pausing at a few questions, struggling to recall the hastily assimilated information. Most other students, even Miss Know-It-All, the recommended student, seemed just as off balance as he was. Deku, quiet, insignificant Deku, on the other hand, had turned into a fucking art critic overnight, answering every question and earning nothing less than Midnight's absolute admiration. In a way, it made sense. Katsuki wasn't blind. He had seen those hero drawings in Deku's books. It made sense he'd happen to have an absurd amount of knowledge on this one obscure subject. As much as it stung to concede defeat, Katsuki had reckoned on losing only this battle and winning the war. Second period was another rout. Math, Katsuki's strongest subject, had turned into a confusing maze of integrals and derivatives, exponents and logarithmic tangled like cables carelessly heaped into a drawer, difficult, but not impossible to untangle. Yet, the moment the grinning pile of goop scrawled out a calculus problem, Deku had his hand raised, with a perfect answer every time. Even Four Eyes couldn't keep up, and he had fucking jet engines for legs. It was the same in every single subject. Deku spoke English as if he had been huffing hamburgers since childhood, had every book in the literature syllabus downloaded to his brain, and recited hero regulations as if he had written them himself. As galling as it was to find himself behind Deku, being visibly behind the recommended chick, who was also behind Deku, stung worse. If it had been just her ahead of him, he'd have rejoiced at the prospect of a worthy contender, someone to surpass on his road to being the greatest hero, but to be outclassed by someone who was in turn outclassed by Deku just rubbed salt into his wounds. As the day wore on, Katsuki came to an infuriating conclusion. Deku had been holding out. He had deliberately held back in middle school to make him look like an idiot at UA. How else could he go from a B-level piece of furniture to top of the class in a single summer? Katsuki swore to himself he'd make Deku pay. Maybe Deku was smart enough for UA, but he'd never be strong enough to be a hero. One way or another, he would prove it. So, Wednesday afternoon, he waited outside UA, but Deku never showed. He got back home half an hour late and had to make a half-assed excuse about having to take a detour when his mother got on his ass for not coming home right away. When he heard the next day that Deku was training every day after school with Eraserhead, Katsuki decided that curfew can go fuck itself. He wasn't waiting a whole week while Deku rubbed his inhuman intelligence into his face. So, Thursday afternoon, as the sun sank below the high-rise apartments, casting an orange glow on their windows, he followed Deku into a quiet, empty alleyway. He made no effort to hide his footsteps. Rather, he went out of his way to make extra noise, trying to make the quirkless wimp turn around. Deku didn't even twitch. Gritting his teeth, Katsuki strode faster until he was within reach of him. "Deku!" he roared, raising his right fist. He waited until Deku started turning to throw the punch, waited until he could see the panic in his eyes. Like the nightmare of getting beaten in combat training, there was no fear in Deku's expression as he watched Katsuki coming towards him. Deku caught Katsuki's punch by the wrist. Pulling back, Deku forced Katsuki to lean further forward while pressing his knee into Katsuki's thigh. Unbalanced, Katsuki fell forward, catching himself with his free hand. He tried to roll over, tried to wriggle loose from Deku's grasp, but the smaller boy was on top of his back, wrestling his hand into a painful hold, palm pressed flat against his back. Katsuki brought up his left hand, detonating the nitroglycerin on his palm, but Deku leaned aside, letting the blast ruffle his hair. Deku snagged the other hand and forced it next to his right, holding them both in place with a knee. "I'm sorry about this, Kakin." Katsuki wriggled, but he couldn't break free. "What the hell, Deku? Let me go. Stop struggling. We need to talk." "Like hell I will. Get the fuck off." Katsuki wriggled and wriggled, but nothing he did made Deku budge an inch. As he struggled, he became painfully aware that, with his palms pressed against his back, he may as well be quirkless. The skin on his hands could stand up to his explosions, but everything else was too sensitive. He'd scorch his back if he tried blasting his way free. It was Deku's way of making Katsuki as worthless as he was, and the mere thought of it made Katsuki sorely tempted to light up his hands like fireworks. His back be damned. Exhausted after his fruitless struggle, Katsuki sagged, letting his head rest on the dirty concrete. "What the fuck do you want?" Deku rolled up one of his sleeves and held his scarred arm in front of Katsuki's face. "Not all these are your doing, but enough are to get you into serious trouble." Katsuki snorted. "Seriously? Nobody gives a damn about you." Aldera didn't, but Aldera was an impoverished school desperate to get someone with a powerful quirk to graduate and put them on the map. They would have covered up murder if it meant getting you into UA. But at UA, it's a different story. They have a reputation to keep, and nobody wants a hero that abuses their classmates. It'd be bad press for UA if someone found out they accepted someone with your track record for hurting people. Katsuki froze, sagging under Deku's weight. The pebble in the road, by some cruel optical illusion, had turned into an indomitable mountain in the far distance the moment he turned the bend towards UA. Deku was smarter than him. Deku was stronger than him, and now, Deku had him at his mercy. What made it worse is Deku had the balls to look sorry as he ground his face in the dirt. Deku stared sorrowfully at him through the grimy glass shard in front of Katsuki's eyes. "So, what? You're going to get me in trouble? What you did would have you expelled, at the very least. If I pressed charges, you could even get arrested. You'd never be a hero." Hot, stinging tears worked their way out of Katsuki's eyes. "You're just rubbing it in before you fuck me over, huh? Having fun, Deku?" His voice was shaking, and he couldn't stop it, but he refused to break down sobbing. "Not at all. This is the only way to get through to you. This is the only way to get you to listen to me. If there was any other way, I'd take it." It sounded more like Deku was trying to convince himself than Katsuki. "Fine. I'm listening, happy? Say whatever the fuck you have to say and let me go. My old hag's already going to chew me out for being late." "All right then. I want you to do 3 things for me. First, no more swear words. Heroes don't swear." "The fuck?" Deku's knee dug into his back, crushing his fingers. Katsuki groaned and gritted his teeth. "That's your last one," Deku said. "If I hear you swear again, I'll go straight to the principal. Do you understand? Are you foo? Are you blackmailing me?" Katsuki watched him through the glass. Deku looked away, and his shoulders slumped. "It's the only way." Hysterical laughter bubbled up in Katsuki as tears dripped down his face. "Are you food for real? What makes you think you can get away with this?" "Second," Deku said, "make friends with Mineta-san and Kaminari-san." "The pervert and the dunce?" Katsuki asked angrily. "You can't be serious." "I am. Invite them to the arcade next Sunday. If they accept, I'll keep your secret. My advice is to start eating lunch with them. Act nicely around everyone, not just them, and wait until next Tuesday before asking them. I'll pay for it, since it's only fair." "You seriously want me to?" "Also, make sure Mineta doesn't get himself expelled." You can hardly be friends with him if he gets himself kicked out for peeping in the women's locker room. Foo! Katsuki cut himself off before he could swear. The blackmail, the humiliation, Deku's casual attitude as he told him how to live his life, like he was a cute little Pomeranian on a leash, made his blood boil. Once again, he bucked and tried to throw Deku off, and once again, Deku's knee forced him back into the dirt. Sweating, tired, and emotionally spent, Katsuki asked in a sullen voice, dreading what the answer would be, "What's the third thing?" "Be the hero I could never be." Deku put something in his pocket, released him, and walked away. Katsuki struggled to get up, half blind with rage, ready to strangle Deku, but by the time he made it back onto his feet, Deku was long gone. He felt around in his pocket and found a 5,000 yen note, clean, neatly folded, fresh from a local bank. Katsuki almost tore it up. "Sure." Katsuki cut himself off, seized with the fear that Deku might still be nearby, waiting for him to crack. Howling in anger, Katsuki punched a brick wall, leaving a scorch mark as his sweat exploded. The sharp ache of his bruised fingers did nothing to dull the ponderous, cold dread in his gut. Katsuki made it back home just before sunset. His mother was on him at an instant, shouting at him for not coming home on time 2 days in a row. Too tired to put up a fight, Katsuki murmured an apology and waited for her to stop shouting. She must have known something was off, from his disheveled clothes, bloodied fingers, and tear-stained face. Her voice softened to a tone Katsuki hadn't heard in years and asked him what was wrong. He couldn't answer her. Alone in his room, without anyone to watch him, Katsuki broke down, sobbing into his pillow as the sun set. If any class was going to give Aizawa Shoyuta gray hairs before his time, it would be this one. It had been just over a week since class had started, but he was already sure he'd have nightmares for years to come. Sharp glances were keeping Mineta in line for now, but he knew he'd have to give the lecherous kid a private lecture before he got out of hand. Yaoyorozu was slowly crumbling before his eyes, the evident cause being she didn't find herself at the center of this classroom's universe. He might not have even noticed if Nizu hadn't pointed out her confidence issues in an offhand manner, but knowing what to watch for, he could see the subtle signs of her shattered self-worth. Todoroki was cold and quiet. That scar, coupled with his asocial attitude, made him wonder if he had 2 abused children in class. Oddly enough, the one he had pegged as the worst of the bunch, the foul-mouthed teen who had the temperament of a lit torch thrown into a fireworks factory, had gone an overnight transformation. His behavior didn't quite do a complete 180, but he'd call it a big step in the right direction. He had stopped insulting his classmates, and even attempted talking to Mineta and Kaminari. The swearing didn't entirely vanish, but Katsuki would always catch himself before he let one slip. Shoyuta noticed that he would glance at Midoriya each time it happened. Speaking of Midoriya, Shoyuta was blown away by his performance thus far. Every teacher he talked to gushed about their new star pupil, raising his hand for every question and giving perfect answers every time. Shoyuta couldn't blame them. During their training sessions, Midoriya absorbed every drop of information, every exercise, every Wing Chun drill, all of it, like parched desert soil. Midoriya only needed to see or be told something once to execute it perfectly, and he would continue to execute it with the precision of factory equipment until his arms shook with exhaustion. After verifying that Midoriya was doing all his personal strength and stamina training correctly, Aizawa focused on giving him a crash course on all the CQC he could teach him: blocks, punches, throws, dodges, and everything in between. He learned months' worth of martial arts in a matter of days. As Midoriya continued his explosive growth, Shoyuta found himself growing rationally angry at all the teachers that had failed him. All the teachers that ignored the enormous potential lying right under their noses. He imagined how much farther Midoriya would be if he had just started his training a year earlier, or 2. Friday afternoon, as Shoyuta retreated to the break room to rejuvenate himself with a pot of coffee, All Might, shrunken down to his civilian form, crept into the room. "Ah, Aizawa-san, I was hoping to get a chance to talk to you. It's been a long week, and I haven't seen you around much." Shoyuta held back a sigh. "What is it, Yagi-san?" "Well, I had questions about the combat training. 2 of my students got sent to the nurse's office, and I was wondering what I could have done differently. Should I have told them to take it easy on each other before they started? Should I have stepped in when it looked like something bad was about to happen? I'm not sure if there was anything I could have even done. But Shoyuta held a hand up, stopping the torrent of doubt and insecurity pouring from the number one hero. Nobody was permanently injured, and the class continued with minimal disruption. You handled it just fine, but they broke bones. Shoyuta gave him a flat, disapproving look. Yes, they did. Your point? Toshinori coughed in surprise and wiped at the blood on his lips. Aizawa-san, I know I'm not an experienced teacher, but isn't that going too far? Isn't it a part of our job to keep these children safe? Safe? Shoyuta snapped. You want to keep them safe? Coddle them like that, and they'll die to the first villain that breaks their nose. That sounds a bit extreme. Really? I figured that you'd understand how dangerous hero work is. Given that hole in your chest, one of Toshinori's hands reflexively went to the old wound. That was not exactly a typical circumstance, and most of us can't punch the weather away, Shoyuta said dryly. For all your strength, for all your power, you still got a crippling injury, something that would have killed anyone else. Heroes die all the time in this line of work. Nobody realizes it because they're all paying attention to you. Every time you save a civilian or lock up a prominent villain, it makes the front pages and 6 o'clock news, and in the meantime, lesser heroes die to nameless villains, a tragedy forgotten by the next headline. Aizawa-san, for what it's worth, I think it's a good thing nobody realizes how dangerous the world had become, but you're not going to be around forever. Aizawa poured himself a cup, grimaced at all the grounds lurking at the bottom, and drank the whole mug in one go. Sooner or later, that wound's going to make you retire, or worse, kill you off, and when that happens, it's going to be ugly. If I'm lucky, I won't be alive to see it happen, but I know my students will have to clean up whatever you leave behind. I want to make sure they're ready for that, and if you have any respect for their lives, you'll do the same. Toshinori was pale, so pale that Aizawa was worried it might be from blood loss. His hands clenched, and fire returned to his hollow, blue eyes. I'll make sure it won't come to that. I'll find someone who can stand just as tall as I can, who can inspire the people, give them hope, drive back villainy and crime. The symbol of peace won't die with me. It might not be perfect, but it's better than letting our home fall to chaos. Aizawa tightened his scarf and went for the door. I'll make sure that symbol of peace won't be needed. Izuku met Todoroki at a small, local soba restaurant. The decor was muted and tasteful. Dark wooden tables, comfortable booths, decorative light fixtures, elegant drawings of ocean waves and leaping fish on the walls. Todoroki wore formal attire, a collared shirt and khakis a touch too small for him that looked as though they had been sitting in a closet for a year. Knowing ahead of time, Izuku matched Todoroki's attire, though it cost him 10,000 yens worth of art commissions. The noodles weren't cheap either. The grilled shrimp were warm, but the noodles themselves were chilled, a dichotomy that seemed to appeal to Todoroki. The dish was topped with a chili flake slurry that had a pleasant, smoky burn. The noodles themselves were infused with green tea, adding herbal notes to each bite. Todoroki looked up from his soba every couple of bites, evidently wondering how to, or if he should break the silence between them. Izuku knew he should wait, let Todoroki settle into the unfamiliar environment, feel the comfort in knowing that no words need to be said. Once he finished his first bowl, Izuku asked for a couple bowls of donbori, cheaper and more filling than the soba. Pushing his body to its physical limits had put his appetite into overdrive, as if his body had turned into a raging inferno, burning itself to ash. The days of intense physical training, a desperate rush to prepare himself for the USJ, had already left him with bone-deep fatigue, a heavy-lidded sense that he would fall asleep the moment he rested his head kept at bay by unhealthy quantities of coffee. Todoroki ordered himself 2 more bowls. Is Aizawa-sensei making you train a lot? Todoroki asked. I have to. I'm so far behind everyone else. The donbori came with slices of raw salmon, pickled seaweed, and unagi sauce. It lacked the savory spice of the soba, but the interplay between the earthy seaweed and tangy, sweet sauce was no less appetizing. Todoroki matched him bite for bite, and within 10 minutes, they had cleaned their plates. The waitress came around, bill in hand, and Izuku took it. I asked if you wanted to come. It's only fair I pay for it. Todoroki watched with a troubled expression as Izuku put crisp, freshly withdrawn bills on the table, leaving a generous tip. "Why did you invite me here?" he asked. "Because I felt like it." Todoroki's countenance soured. "Is it because of endeavor?" "Not at all," Izuku said. "I am aware you both share the same family name. I wouldn't be much of a hero fanboy, would I be, if I didn't recognize that much? But I wasn't aware that you two had a familial relationship until you brought it up just now." The fire did make me wonder. At the mention of the fire, Todoroki grimaced and looked away. Izuku leaned forward and said, "I'm guessing things aren't great between you and him." Stony silence was Todoroki's only answer. Instead of trying to pry further, Izuku said, "I don't remember my father. My mom says he had a fire quirk, not as strong as Endeavor's. When I was really little, I hoped I'd get his quirk. I spent a lot of time waving my hands in front of a candle, trying to make the fire move. One time, when it was getting a bit late for my quirk to come in, I even stuck my hand into the flame, as if that would make the quirk appear somehow. All I got out of it were burned fingers." Todoroki poked his chopsticks at the dregs of chili flakes in his bowl, not meeting Izuku's eyes. "You never got your quirk." "No, I didn't. Yet you're trying to be a hero anyways." "I can't see myself doing anything else." "Why?" Todoroki asked. "Why do you want to be a hero so badly?" "I want to help people." Todoroki blinked. "That's it?" he asked incredulously. Anger crept into his voice. "Do you expect me to believe that? I can tell you're being pushed to your physical limits, exercising until your arms and legs ache, never quite able to catch your breath, so exhausted each night you pass out before taking your clothes off. You're telling me that you're willing to suffer all that just because you want to help people?" "When I was little," Izuku said, "one of my favorite videos was when All Might made his debut. There was no villain to fight, no flashy battle, no cool super moves. It was just All Might, a burning building, and over 100 civilians trapped inside. As the building collapsed around him, All Might charged inside, running out with a dozen people on his shoulders each time. The whole time, through every second of that rescue, he had this big grin on his face, a grin that said that everything would be okay." Midoriya made his own smile, a pale imitation, but one that got a visible response out of Todoroki. "I wanted to be like that." Todoroki glowered. "My father's been trying to be better than him his whole career. What makes you think you could be anything like him without a quirk? You don't need to be strong to save people. As weak as I was, there was someone who would have died if I hadn't saved them. It's why I went to UA. I saw the chance to be a hero, and I took it." Midoriya chuckled and scratched at his hair. "To tell the truth, I didn't think I'd get as far as I did." "So, you're not trying to be number one?" "I know I never could be. Just saving people is enough for me." Todoroki leaned back in his chair, still processing everything Izuku had said. While he was distracted, Izuku asked, "What about you? Why did you go to UA?" "Not your business." "Is it because your father made you?" The silence between them was cold and dense enough to climb with an ice axe. Todoroki stared frostily at Izuku and asked, "What makes you think that? It doesn't seem like you like your father that much. You always call him Endeavor, for one." Todoroki winced. He stared down at the table, never meeting Izuku's eyes. "Just drop it, all right? It's nothing." As much as Izuku hated himself for forcing the issue, he knew that he had to get through to Todoroki. "Do you actually want to be a hero?" "Yes. I decided on my own that I will be a hero, but I'm going to do it my way. I'm not going to use Endeavor's power." "That's why you don't use your fire?" Todoroki nodded. "I'll become the #1 hero with just my ice." "You probably could," Izuku said. "Your ice is a very strong and versatile quirk, arguably better than Endeavor's. It reduces property damage, though you'll need to be careful not to freeze pipes. It can reshape the terrain, shield civilians, treat burns, imprison villains, though watch for hypothermia and frostbite. And it gives you more mobility." "You really think I can do it?" "Absolutely." Todoroki snorted, a ghost of a smile forming on his lips. "Endeavor always said I was holding myself back, wasting my potential, would never beat All Might if I didn't use both sides of my quirk. It feels nice, hearing from someone that I can do it." Izuku wanted to leave the conversation there, at that high note, with Todoroki happy and content, but he knew what had to come next. "You shouldn't." Todoroki's smile vanished, like a snowflake drifting through a bonfire. "Why not?" "Because someday, somewhere, there's going to be someone you could only save with your fire. Someone freezing to death, surrounded by villains, with no one else to save them. No way for you to call backup or get them somewhere warmer. Someone who will die unless you use your fire to warm them up. Todoroki's mismatched eyes bored into him. You can't know that. If you're serious about being a pro-hero, you'll have to be ready for it. When that day comes, I hope that someone else's life will mean more to you than what your dad thinks of you. Izuku stood, straightened his shirt, and said, I should get going before my mom starts worrying. She doesn't like it when I stay out late. Have a good night, Shotokuin. The familiarity bothered Izuku, who was ill-accustomed to being familiar with anyone, but he had faith that it was the final set of words that would save his life at the USJ. The dojo that Ojiro trained at, which doubled as his home, was nestled between a ramen shop and a quick mart. The wooden floors had nicks and dents, but they were polished until they shone, and though their mats and GI had seen better days, everything was clean and smelled of juniper. Ojiro's own GI was no less time-worn than the rest of the dojo, but his clothes were freshly laundered and expertly folded, his green belt gleaming around his waist. The living space over the dojo was almost as cramped as the Midoriya's apartment. To Izuku's eyes, it was cozy. The furniture was worn with age, from seats that had shaped themselves to the people that sat in them every night for many years, to the table with subtle indents where bowls and plates had been set at every meal, to couches where one could tell who sat where by the size and shape of the indent in the cushions. An old cathode ray television sat on a cabinet in the living room, playing the news over crackling speakers. Old photographs hung room every wall, some showing Masahiro holding up a new belt, training in the dojo, smiling in front of a birthday cake, held in his mother's arms as an infant. Others were much older, the colors bleached by sunlight, of the parents as they grew up. The whole place had a history to it, one that remembered the Ojiro family through generations. Ojiro's father greeted Izuku warmly and beamed when he expressed interest in martial arts. He was an older man, blonde hair going gray at the temples, wiry and lean. His tail was thin and slender, lacking the weight and strength of Ojiro's tail, but more dexterous, able to pour a cup of tea while he brought out the sugar. As they drank, Izuku thanked him for the tea, complimenting its deep, herbal flavor, and the older man replied that he had good taste. All the talking upstairs was small talk, how school was going, what his home life was like, what interested him about martial arts. Izuku asked questions of his own, how long they've run the dojo, were there any competitions, what the process was for getting belts, asked more out of politeness than any interest in the answers. Once they had finished the tea, Ojiro led Izuku back downstairs. He gave him a GI out of a hamper and let Izuku change in the bathroom. Izuku's hands went through the motions as if he had worn a GI countless times before, though it had been his first time trying on the garment, because he already knew the hand motions he would make to hold the garment together. Ojiro seemed startled when he walked out. He recovered, but his expression became more guarded. It wasn't something Izuku could help, he reasoned, since he had no idea what had caused it, and his future showed it happening anyways. Over one of the tatami mats, Ojiro led him through some basic blocks and counters. Ojiro would demonstrate once, either having Izuku try to punch him or take a blow, and have Izuku replicate his movements. His vision of the future showed him how to execute each move. Armed with that knowledge, Izuku quickly made his way through the exercises. After he demonstrated proficiency in blocking and attacking, Ojiro showed him throws. They both hit the mats many times as they walked through each throw. You're learning fast, Ojiro said once they were done. He poured out 2 cups of water from a nearby fountain and offered Izuku one. If you're interested, you could try getting a belt. You'd start out as a novice, but you could get my rank within a few years. Thanks, but I'd rather focus on becoming a hero. Ojiro's smile faltered. Well, couldn't you do both? I mean, what else could you do if you want to fend for yourself as a hero? I still intend to learn martial arts, but I should also think about what kind of support gear I'll work with. Midoriya gestured at his short, skinny frame. As I am, I'm never going to cut it fighting with my bare hands. Well, what if your equipment breaks, or you run out of it? Then I'd use my hands. Avoiding that is part of a hero's job as well. Sure, I need to be prepared for emergencies. That's why I want to learn martial arts. But support equipment will make me more effective as a hero. Ojiro's tail whipped back and forth as he thought to himself. I guess I can understand that, but if you devoted yourself entirely to martial arts, eventually, you would be good enough not to need any equipment. It would take longer, yes, but in the end, With hard work and practice, you could achieve anything with your bare hands. What would happen in the meantime? Izuku countered. How many people would I fail to save because I decided not to use support equipment? We're just students. It'll be years before we'll have to save someone. You'll have plenty to master martial arts before then. Izuku shook his head. There's work studies over the summer. While we won't be allowed to engage villains, it's possible we'll be forced to defend ourselves and others. Ojiro faltered, but with visible inspiration, he rallied himself. You won't be allowed any equipment during the sports festival. If you want to get into the work studies, you'll need to be able to fend for yourself without that equipment. You won't be able to save anyone during work studies if hero agencies never notice you. True, but martial arts won't be of much help during the early rounds. Those are usually either a race or some form of team-based exercise. As long as I make it to the bracket, I'll get some offers. Ojiro thought for a moment and sighed in defeat. You have a point. Still, I'm farther along in my training. Adding equipment now would just throw off my fighting style. Izuku feigned surprise. You're not going to add any equipment? I thought I had some good ideas. You did, Ojiro said uneasily. It's just that they don't fit with my style as a hero. Why not? I thought I picked weapons that seemed right at home with a martial artist aesthetic. Well, I kind of want to be a hero that doesn't have to depend on equipment. So many heroes these days only fight as well as they do because of their equipment, like Endeavor's coolant suit. But there's one hero who's amazing without any support equipment. All Might. Exactly. He made me believe that I could be an amazing hero just with my family's martial arts. That's what I want to be a hero for, to show everyone that heroes are more than just their equipment. The only reason All Might doesn't use any support equipment is that nothing can handle his strength, Izuku said. It's not about making a point or showing what can be done. I know that if there was support equipment that would help him save people, he would use it, because that's what matters most to him. How do you know that? Izuku took out his first hero journal, brought along for this moment. The entire book, front to back, was devoted entirely to All Might, from his childish hero worship to concrete analysis of his career. Early in his career, Izuku said as he flipped to the relevant section, All Might worked closely with David Shield. There were some prototypes he tried, but all of them broke when he used his quirk. Ojiro stared in shock at the sketched images of All Might wearing modified gauntlets and boots. I had no idea. It was a long time ago. I had to do a lot of digging to find good images for these sketches. After a deep breath, Ojiro stood tall and said, Well, I'll be the first then. I'll show everyone you don't need equipment to be a hero. Honestly, you probably could. It would be hard, but you could do it. And you'd even gain popularity in some circles for sticking with that promise. You really think so? You could, Izuku said, bracing himself for another set of shattered dreams. But I don't think you should. Ojiro's face went blank. Why not? Because, one day, there will be someone that your martial arts can't save, no matter how much you practice. The villain will be too far away, out of your reach, and someone will die because of it. Sure, you'd still be a hero, but you would wonder what would have happened if you had the tools to save that person. Frustration slowly surfaced on Ojiro's face, though he struggled to contain it. After an awkward silence, Izuku slipped off the GI, handed it back to Ojiro, and said he had to go home. Once Izuku had left, the elder Ojiro, teacup in hand, told the younger, Cherish the friend that gives you advice they know you don't want to hear. Those are the kind that truly care about you. Ashido took Izuku to a bustling, vibrant machi shop. Colorful furniture, pop music playing over the speakers, bright pink uniforms worn by smiling employees assaulted Izuku's senses as they got in line. It took nearly 10 minutes for the sheer volume of customers to wind their way through the queue and get their machi before it was their turn. Ashido got strawberry flavor, and Izuku went with mint, already knowing how it would taste. Waiting in line, with a cute girl leaning on his shoulder, Izuku felt a strange combination of awkwardness and exhilaration. Even knowing everything that would happen, it felt strangely unreal that he, quirkless, worthless Deku, was on a date with a girl. It wouldn't last, but at least he could say he had gone on a date before he died. Ashido looked right at home in the flamboyant atmosphere, with a black tank top and shorts that showed enough leg to make Izuku uneasy every time he looked down. Izuku went with a plain long-sleeve shirt and jeans, casual, but a bit stuffier than anything that would have fit the venue. Their seat was in the middle of the turmoil, with people passing them and idle conversations droning over the backdrop music. Ishido dug right in, tearing a big bite of pink-colored rice cake and chewing it vigorously. Izuku ate his green-colored treat at a more deliberate pace. "Isn't this stuff the best, Izuku-in?" Ishido asked between bites. Izuku had to speak louder than usual to make himself heard. "It's really good. Thanks for inviting me here, Ishido-san." Ishido waggled a finger in front of Izuku's face. "Nope, we're on a date, so you have to call me Mina-chan." "Sure, Mina-chan." Izuku couldn't remember the last time he had used such a casual honorific. Despite his nerves, the name rolled easily off his tongue. Mina smiled at him. "So, how long have you been drawing?" "I started when I was really little. 4, I think. After I saw All Might for the first time, I got obsessed with heroes. I started drawing pictures and writing about them, and as time went on, I got better at both." "You have more journals, right? Mind if I see one?" "Sure." Izuku had his latest journal on him, since there will be a villain attack right around the corner in an hour. He had only just started it, with a few entries on Kimui Woods and Mount Lady. Mina chuckled when she saw the heroine's skimpy outfit. "Careful, Izuku-in. People might think you're a pervert if you keep drawing stuff like this." Izuku leaned forward to see the image that she was talking about. Mount Lady was leaning forward, greeting her audience and showing a generous amount of cleavage. Some rough-sketched bystanders were drawn in for scale. Her costume has to stretch many times its size when she grows. It can only cover so much at full size. I bet she does that on purpose. Well, it has certainly gotten a lot of attention. I've been getting so many commissions for her lately." "You do commissions?" Mina waggled her eyebrows with a mischievous smile. "Do you do naughty commissions?" Izuku shook his head. "People offered me a lot of money, but I never felt comfortable with it. I know some heroes, like Midnight, say it's fine, but it feels wrong, like I'm stripping them myself and letting people ogle them." "Yeah, I can see how that would be weird." "How much did they offer?" "One guy offered 50,000 yen. Most do 5 to 10,000. Mina's jaw dropped. "That much? Really? That's for the really hard stuff to make?" Izuku took out his phone and opened some image files. "I usually make them on a tablet. Makes it easier to do the shading and add effects." "Wow, that's awesome." Mina flipped through the files, marveling at each one. "You made all these? How much time did it take?" "Each one takes a couple days. I have to do the line art, fill in the colors, then the shading. Shading takes a long time to get right. I wish I could make art this pretty. All I can do are doodles." "What do you do for fun?" Izuku asked. "Aside from asking out cute boys?" Mina asked with a sly smile. "I like dancing." "Really? What kind?" "Just dancing, I guess. Whatever's fun. I've been dying to try out a nightclub, but my parents won't let me." "Don't you have to be 20? "Yeah, but once I move out, I'll get a fake ID and party it up." Mina leaned closer and whispered, "You can come with me if you want." Izuku shook his head. "I appreciate the offer, but I want to focus on hero work." Mina's horns drooped. "Oh, so, does that mean?" "Yeah. I'd rather not get into anything right now." "Sorry." "No, it's fine. I understand." Mina smiled at him and said, "Thanks for coming, though. I still had lots of fun." "Same here. No one's ever asked me out before, so thanks for doing that." "It was really nice of you." "Really? No one was interested in you." "Well, I am quirkless." Mina winced. "Ah." She punched him lightly on the shoulder. "They all missed out." "You're pretty great." "Thanks. You're pretty great too." Mina giggled and said, "Well, if you ever change your mind, you have my number. I'm not going to wait around forever, so don't get mad at me if I have to turn you down because I'm with someone else." "That's fine. Anyways, I had some ideas for your hero outfit you might like." "Really? Let's hear it." Opening up his 1A notebook, he showed Mina his rough sketch of a set of bulbous gloves. "I don't know. I'm not sure I like the way they look." "That can be fixed. The general idea is that you can store the acid you make, so you can release it all at once later. Like what Bakugo does." "I don't know. Acid can be pretty dangerous. It's usually better just to use a little bit at a time." "It could be useful in emergencies," Izuku said. "Like if there's a lot of villains at once, or a really powerful one. It could also clear obstacles. It would be tough to use around civilians and could cause severe property damage, which is why it should be used sparingly. Still, I think you should at least try it. See what you think. Well, you're the smart one. If you think I should, then I will. Cool. I can't wait to see it in action. You'll draw me when I use it, right? Show me how it turns out. He knew he would never be around for a second date, but it was nice to know that she was interested. While they were jogging under Aizawa's supervision, Izuku ran up to Uraraka and said, I noticed you have trouble nullifying the gravity of multiple objects at once. Ah, Midoriya-kun. Yeah, Uraraka said between breaths. I get nauseous when I try it. Have you tried making objects just a bit lighter instead of nullifying it altogether? It might be easier on you. I never thought of that. Thanks. I'll give it a try. Izuku could only guess how it would save her life, but he knew that short conversation would matter. Midoriya Inko knew that her son was not okay. Learning that he had been quirkless, despite both his parents having quirks, shattered her baby Izuku's dream of being a hero. Maybe she shouldn't have told him it wouldn't be possible. Maybe her son would still be happy if she had let him live a lie. But she knew she couldn't live with herself if Izuku got himself hurt trying to be a hero without a quirk. The first couple weeks were hell. If Izuku wasn't crying over his favorite All Might video, he had the lifeless demeanor of a zombie. And if he wasn't dejectedly staring off into space, he was working on his notebook with shaking fingers. Inko almost broke down, almost told him that he could still be a hero, that he could sign up for martial arts or something, learn how to save others without a quirk. If it had gone on for much longer, she might have. It was as if a switch was flipped in Izuku's brain. One day, the crying, the listlessness, the expression of a broken heart and shattered dreams was replaced by apathy. Sure, he still smiled or frowned at things. Over the years, Inko learned to read the subtle changes in expression. However, he never laughed, never seemed surprised at anything, never said more than he needed to or tried anything different. He kept to himself, working on his hero notebooks and studying for school. Inko sometimes wondered if she should take her son to a psychologist. Even if it would cost her more than she could afford, she could find a way to make it work. The only thing that stopped her was the fact that she couldn't say that anything was wrong with her son. He didn't behave like other kids, but his grades were normal and his teachers didn't have any comments. If she couldn't say there was wrong with him, then would there even be anything to fix? The slime incident seemed to spark a change in Izuku. He started working out, eating more, and going outside. When she asked why, Izuku told her that he had applied to UA's hero program, and he wanted to pass. As tempted as she was to put her foot down, tell him it was too dangerous, especially after a villain nearly killed him, the thought of him finally coming out of his shell changed her mind. Inko had hoped that she would get her smiling son back. Only, he never did come out of that shell. Though his appetite improved and his body grew visibly more athletic, Izuku's attitude remained unchanged. As the day of the exam approached, Izuku showed no hint of excitement or anxiety. He left home with his backpack slung over his shoulders, a pair of garden shears poking out the top, and a plexiglass shield in one hand. When Izuku got the results back, with the top score on the physical exam and a passing grade on the written portion, earning a full-ride scholarship on top of getting into the hero program, and casually tossed the acceptance letter on the table without a hint of joy or happiness, Inko knew she had to talk to someone. She waited until the school year began, waited until she could take a day off from both of her jobs before calling up the school. After telling the assistant what she wanted, she was quickly passed to the principal. She quickly explained her concerns, and he asked her what time would work best for her. When she said she could make any time on Monday, he scheduled her for an early morning visit. After Izuku left for school, Inko packed her own backpack, filling it with the doctor's notice she got when he was 4, along with anything else she thought could explain what she thought was wrong. Pictures of him alone during birthday parties, his neutral expression when he got a new All Might figurine, report cards and notes from parent-teacher conferences. Eraserhead met her out at the school gates. Izuku had told him who he was and explained he operated outside the limelight. But it felt hard to believe that the unkempt, shabby-looking man wasn't only her son's homeroom teacher, but also a pro-hero. The press parted uneasily around him as he glared them aside, making room for Inko. Eraserhead complimented her for not wasting any time and led her into the school. She gawked at the scenery, struggling to take in how vast and modern the school looked, but Eraserhead's rapid pace made her hustle to keep up with him. She was nearly out of breath by the time they made it to a conference room. A tiny, white-furred rodent in a suit and an old lady in a doctor's robe with a syringe for a hair ornament were waiting for her, seated around a large table. 4 cups of tea were set out, still steaming hot, with a white china pot at the center of the table. Eraserhead sat next to the rodent, leaving Inko the seat at the far end of the table. Inko tried the tea and found it refreshingly sweet. "I'm not fond of fruity teas myself," the rodent told her, "but I figured you would enjoy this more. Is it to your liking?" "Yes, thank you." Inko took another sip to calm her nerves. "Thank you for meeting with me, Nizu-san. I don't want to be a bother." "Not at all," Nizu said. "The welfare of this institution's students will always be my top priority. I am happy to meet with concerned parents at any time." Gesturing at the others around the table, Nizu said, "This is Shizenji Chio, the school nurse, and Aizawa Shoyuta, Midoriya-kun's homeroom teacher. So, I know we discussed this over the phone a bit, but I would appreciate it if you could give us a detailed account of what concerns you have." Inko told them everything she could think of: the doctor's diagnosis and his behavior the few weeks after, the sudden change, his apathy, the slime villain attack, and his fervent training afterwards. She showed her pictures, the notes, the medical records, wondering if the teachers were going to think she was crazy. It sounded crazy to her, all laid out, crazy to raise a fuss over her son being distant and withdrawn after having his dreams crushed. But it felt good to get all her worries off her chest. Nizu had been taking notes throughout her speech. When she stopped, he kept writing a few minutes, the scratching of his fountain tip pen filling the silence in the room. "Is that everything?" he asked. "Yes. Thank you for listening. I'm sorry if I wasted your time." "You aren't omitting anything, are you?" Nizu's beady eyes seemed to bore holes into her skull. Inko swallowed nervously and said, "No, I don't think so. Why? Is something wrong?" Shizenji and Aizawa exchanged a look that made Inko's stomach plummet. Nizu tapped his pen on the table, lost in thought. "For the record," the principal said, "I don't suspect any wrongdoing on your part." Inko's heart nearly stopped at the gravity of his tone and words. "However, if I find reason to believe otherwise, I may have to involve the authorities." Inko's heart joined her stomach somewhere near her toes. "What happened?" Both faculty members turned towards the principal. Nizu took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry to ask you like this, but are you aware of Izuku's scars?" "His what?" Nizu nodded towards Aizawa. The teacher took out a remote, turning on a projector over the table. The image taken during the combat training was a bit blurry, zoomed in, but she could still make out faint splotches and lines on Izuku's skin, blindingly white against Izuku's pale skin. Tears poured down Inko's face as she took in the image, blurring the scars even more. "When?" she asked, her voice hoarse. "When did this happen?" "I got a closer look at his scars when he came into my office," Shizenji said. "They all look years old, and though I can't be sure, it looks like they all happened at different times. As best as I can guess, this has been happening for a long time." The nurse made a grim expression and said bitterly, "They don't look self-inflicted. Someone did this to him?" "Who? Why?" "We don't know," Nizu said. "I've been reviewing school records, but Aldera didn't have anything on record. It will take time, but I'm working on getting access to their security footage." Inko could barely speak from how tight her throat had become. She couldn't see anymore, blinded by her tears. "How did I not know about this?" she wailed, sobbing into her arm. "How could I be so stupid?" Shizenji hopped out of her chair and went to Inko's side. "You too," she snapped at Nizu and Aizawa. "Out. We'll be next door," Nizu said. "Take as much time as you need, Midoriya-san." When they were alone, Recovery Girl pulled a chair over next to Inko. She sat next to her, patting her shoulder while she sobbed into the table. "Everything will be okay, Midoriya-san. We will do everything we can for your son." "How did I not know? He had scars all over his arm and back for God knows how long, and I never even noticed them." "How? Do you think he was hiding them on purpose?" Inko sniffed and wiped her face. He had to have. He always wore long shirts, no matter how hot it was. He always said he hated swimming. How did I miss all that?" "It's all right, dearie, you didn't know. Nobody's perfect. There's nothing you could have done if he didn't let you know about his problems." "But why?" Inko grabbed Shizenji by the shoulders. Her eyes were flooding with fresh tears. "Why didn't he tell me? Did he think I wouldn't care? Did he think I wouldn't believe him or do anything about it?" "I don't know," Recovery Girl said. That's something you'll have to find out from your son. Inko's shoulders sagged. I did this. When he got the diagnosis, he asked me if he could still be a hero. I just apologized. I couldn't even tell him that he could still have his dream. I was so worried about what would happen to him, and if I had been more supportive, if I helped him become a hero like he always dreamed, maybe he would have trusted me. Maybe he would have told me all this was happening. Inko grew nearly incomprehensible as her chest shook from all the sobbing. Maybe it wouldn't have even happened in the first place. You weren't wrong, Midoriya-san. Hero work is dangerous. Your son came in a few days ago with 2 broken fingers. I'm guessing he didn't tell you that either? Inko's stricken countenance was all the answer Shizenji needed. The elderly woman shook her head. It's a common enough occurrence during training. Burns, cuts, broken bones, concussions, sprains, you name it. I've seen it in my office. We try to limit it, but fact is, they need to be exposed to that danger beforehand, or the real world will chew them up. Hero work isn't glamorous. It isn't a cozy life. It's a life of hardship and sacrifice, one that isn't easy for anyone, even those with powerful quirks. If I hadn't seen what Midoriya was capable of for myself, I would have insisted that he be transferred to general studies. Even now, I still can't believe he's here. I don't even know how I did it. How awful is that? I should have been there to support him, and instead, he had to do all this on his own. No wonder he never told me anything. Inko buried her face in Shizenji's shoulder, drenching her coat. She cried like that for 15 minutes, while Recovery Girl patted her back and muttered softly to her. I'm sorry, Inko said as she pulled away. I shouldn't have. It's quite all right. Shizenji rummaged around in her pocket and took out a gummy. Here, eat one. You'll feel better. Inko stared numbly at the green teddy bear between her fingers. She popped it in her mouth, grimacing at the sickly sweet apple flavor. When she swallowed it, a surge of energy spread through her, making her feel a little less like death. Thank you, she said, her voice trembling as she held back another round of sobs. You're going through all this trouble just for me. I don't feel like I deserve it. That's what heroes are for, Shizenji said with a warm smile. We help whoever and however we can. Don't worry about not being worth it, because you are. You care about your son, and because of that, I know the 2 of you will be okay. Inko took a deep breath and wrung her hands together. Thank you, Shizenji-san. I don't know what to do next. Where do I even begin? Well, we have a counselor on staff for situations like this. If you would like, we can talk to Nizu and see if we can set up an appointment. We also have psychiatrists we can contact, but it may take a while before they can see your son. The counselor sounds perfect. Inko wiped her face on her sleeve, grimacing when some of her makeup stained the fabric. I'm a mess. Don't worry about that. I have some powder you can borrow. It's fine. I'm just heading home anyways, but thank you. Shizenji poured Inko another cup of tea. Should I go get Nizu? Please. Inko barely had time for a sip before everyone was back. She tried her best to stay in control of herself, but she knew she looked like a mess from the pained expression on Aizawa's face. From what I understand, you wish to set up an appointment with the school's counselor, correct? When Inko nodded, the principal said, I can get you in as early as next Monday, after school. Will that be all right? It will. She had worked that day for both jobs, but the thought didn't even cross her mind. Thank you so much. Anytime, Midoriya-san. Is there anything else we can help you with? No, you've done so much already. I'll be fine. Thank you. Aizawa-san can take you to the entrance. I'll send you an email to confirm the appointment and tell you when to arrive. Gathering up her things, Inko said her goodbyes to Nizu and Shizenji before following Aizawa out of the room. This time, the pro-hero walked more slowly, looking behind him once in a while with a concerned expression. Each time they came to a corner, he made sure no one was in the hallways. The path was a different one, winding past large, closed-off buildings and open fields. When they arrived at a small gate at the rear of the school, Aizawa paused. This is the back entrance. After all that, I figured you wouldn't want to deal with all the vultures lurking outside the school. It took Inko a few moments to realize that Aizawa meant the reporters. Yes, thank you. I don't think I want to end up in a newspaper looking like this. Aizawa smiled, but it was strained. I am so sorry for everything you and your son have been through. He pulled up a sleeve, revealing a few scars of his own. I know what it's like. Will he be okay? Inko asked. He's a tough kid. And honestly, he has the potential to be an amazing hero. He had a determined gleam in his eye when he said, I'll make sure of it. I wish I had seen it sooner. If I had, it's not your fault. That much, I'm sure of. He scowled and added, if anything, it's whichever incompetent idiot was running his prep school for letting it get this bad. If any students at UA try to harass him, I'll see to it that they are expelled at the minimum. Good. I could tell that his old teachers never really cared, but I didn't think there was anything I could do about it. I'm glad he finally has a good teacher. Wiping away a stray tear, she said, thank you, and have a good day, Aizawa-san. When Izuku came home, Inko almost confronted him on the spot. Seeing the long sleeves of his school uniform, knowing what was hiding beneath them, brought fresh tears to her eyes, but she wiped them away before her son could see. You know, she said shakily, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. I didn't believe you could be a hero, but you did it. You made it to UA, and I want you to know, I'll do whatever I can to support your dream. She didn't know how she expected her son to react, but his indifferent nod felt like the cruelest answer possible. Thanks, Mom. I'm glad you think so. Izuku went to his room, training some more, from the sound of stomping feet and heavy breathing behind his door. 1 week, she just had to pull through for 1 week, and they could sort this all out. It had taken her far too long, but she finally got the help her son needed. Niza had another conference room waiting when Recovery Girl kicked them both out. Nizu reached for his cup, only to find he had left it in the other room. What a bother, he said idly. I hope it doesn't get cold before we go back. Aizawa took a seat and folded his arms. I thought we weren't going to approach his mother. She approached me. Good thing she did. I had thought that she was helping her son hide his quirk, but I see now that she's as in the dark as we are. Is that good or bad? Nizu grimaced. Very bad. The fact that he managed to keep those scars a secret from his own mother for so long speaks to how well he can hide things, and it also points to possible trust issues. Getting Izuku to admit he has a quirk, let alone confide the details of its use and limitations, will be nearly impossible. Aizawa drummed his fingers on the table, looking down with an uneasy countenance. I feel bad for her. We dropped one hell of a bombshell on her, and we still haven't told her about his mystery quirk. I'm afraid we won't be doing that today. An edge crept into Aizawa's voice. Why not? For one, all our evidence is circumstantial. While we could use Tsukachi to resolve the matter, the situation's too delicate for such a hammer, so to speak. Second, if Midoriya-kun were to catch wind of our suspicions, it may make him flee. Considering that he has an information-based quirk of equal or greater magnitude of my own, with unknown function and characteristics, I shudder to imagine how difficult it would be to track him down. He could disappear entirely, or worse yet, team up with villains. So, what are we going to do? We can't tell his mother, we can't confront him. All we're doing is waiting for something to happen. What are we even waiting for? More information. I've been keeping tabs on Midoriya-kun's activity, and what I've seen so far is worrying. His behavior has been highly out of character since starting classes at UA. His academic performance has greatly improved, and he's socializing far more than the limited information I've gotten from Aldra would suggest, going so far as to meet with multiple classmates off campus. For the past 3 days, he has gone out with 3 members of the class, Todoroki, Ojiro, and Ishido. Of those, both Ojiro and Ishido filed requests for new support gear today. On a hunch, I decided to ask them where they got the ideas for their gear, and both of them told me that it was Midoriya's idea. He's known in his class for his thorough quirk analysis, Aizawa said. It's no surprise that his classmates would want his advice. True, but Ojiro had a more interesting tale to tell. He had insisted on not using equipment at all, but Midoriya warned him that if he didn't, someone would die. Aizawa leaned forward, thinking the implications of what Nizu said. So, is it a predictive quirk after all? Possible. Again, there's not much we know. What worries me is why his behavior has radically changed. Nizu scratched at the side of his face as his attention wandered. If he was worried we suspected he had a quirk, the last thing he would do is draw attention to himself, which means there has to be something else going on. Whatever the reason, I fear we'll find out soon enough. Worried by Nizu's tone of voice, Aizawa decided to change the subject. Have you figured anything out about his quirk? Nothing so far. However, Midoriya-san gave us a good hint. The change in emotions. Exactly. I'd wager that it marks the activation of his quirk. Whatever it is, it caused a significant change to his emotional state. All the more reason to get him counseling, Aizawa said grimly. I know you didn't want to single him out, but after hearing this, I agree, and I think today will give us a wonderful opportunity to make it happen. Aizawa blinked in surprise. You're going to suggest it to her? I will. I'd like to think that it would be enough to get Midoriya-kun to open up to us, but I doubt we'd be so lucky. It will be enough to at least get a better understanding of his emotional state. In time, that might help us solve this riddle. As it turned out, Recovery Girl had already suggested counseling, and Midoriya Inko had enthusiastically agreed. To Aizawa's relief, they finally had a set date for a counseling session. They finally had the chance to help such a promising student, considering how disheveled Midoriya-san appeared. Aizawa led her out the back, making sure no one saw her. Before parting ways with her, he tried to reassure her as best as he could. From the sad smile on her face, he felt it might have been enough. It tore at his heart, knowing that they were hiding Izuku's quirk from her. For a moment, he felt tempted to tell her what he knew, but he couldn't deny Nizu's logic. He watched in silence as Midoriya Inko walked the winding, lonely path back to the school's parking lot. Katsuki felt like a pot of boiling water with the lid clamped shut. He felt Deku's eyes on him wherever he went, in the lunchroom, in the hallways, even when he was checking his phone in the bathroom. Swearing came easily to him, Katsuki's way of showing the world that he meant fucking business. Now, every time he started one, a jolt of fear held his tongue. Even at home, even when locked away in his room, even when Deku shouldn't possibly be able to overhear him, he couldn't bring himself to swear. He knew he was being stupid. He knew he was being weak. But if all it took was one swear to cost him his rightful place as the #1 hero, he'd never swear again for the rest of his life, no matter how much like a fucking wimp it made him feel. So, he kept the lid on his anger and sucked up to Kaminari and Mineta. It was easier said than done. They both regarded him like a rabid dog at first, glancing uneasily at one another when he asked to sit next to them. It was only natural. They were too weak to handle him. So, he had to roll over and show those pitiful puppies his belly, wag his tail, smile, ask nicely, and play the meek, pitiful little Pomeranian that Deku wanted him to be. It had taken mentioning that he played the drums to get Kaminari to open up. The dunce was into rock music and wanted to play the bass. Mineta had volunteered to be lead singer, salivating over all the chicks he'd score once they started a band. It took all of Katsuki's discipline to keep from strangling him right then and there. As the days wore on, Kaminari and Mineta gradually warmed up to him. Katsuki endured their discussions of girls, music, and video games, pretending to be engaged. It wasn't hard. His ear for the drums led him to multiple rock bands, and it was always fun to crush virtual villains in a video game, but the idle conversation made him feel as though he was wasting time, when he could have instead read through the textbooks or clobbered a training dummy at one of the gyms. As if it wasn't enough that he had to suck up to the hero course's lowlifes, he had to watch Deku surround himself with half the class, as if to prove to Katsuki that he could surpass him in the lunchroom as well. Each day, he'd have someone different sitting next to him, making hand gestures with signs, having raccoon eyes lean on his shoulder to look at his hero notes, swapping baked goods with lips, or just sitting in silence with the human thermostat. Deku's table was the center of the room, with the rest of the hero students orbiting around him, while Katsuki was out in the middle of fucking nowhere, right next to the useless Gen Ed students and their creepy, muttering business-minded twins. Per Izuku's instructions, Katsuki asked his two reluctant companions if they wanted to hit up the arcades. Their hesitation died the moment he waved Izuku's crisp 5,000 yen note in front of their faces. By the next day, they both confirmed that it was all right with their parents. Katsuki took them to an arcade on the other side of town. The last thing he wanted was to run into his old classmates. He had heard that the place was more expensive, but worth the price. As he walked past row after row of arcade cabinets, all looking as fresh as when they rolled off the factory floor, he reluctantly agreed it was better than his old haunt. Kaminari took the lead, steering them towards an on-the-rail shooter with room for 4. Mock villains held gagged civilians hostage as they made their way floor by floor, shooting flames, feathers, and denim strands in obvious homage to top heroes. Kaminari had terrible aim, roasting as many civilians as villains, and Mineta was a touch too short to reach over the console, leaving him shooting feathers towards the top of the screen. Katsuki had to work overtime, flinging denim left and right to leave villains comically hogtied with their own clothes. Miraculously, they made it to the final boss fight on the roof. Muscular, mechanical eye leering at them, muscles bulging out of his skin, laughed at them as he stomped onto the screen. Nondescript fallen heroes littered the scene, beaten into walls or left lying on the floor. They had to target bulges in his arms and legs, stopping him from throwing punches and softening him up until his eye was exposed. After a few shots to the eye, he'd go back to guarding it, rinsing and repeating until he hit the floor. "Hell yeah," Kaminari shouted. "That's what I'm talking about." With a target half the size of the screen, Kaminari still found a way to roast the heroes in the background. Mineta at least proved his worth in stopping the overhead punches and going for the eye, but Katsuki barely blocked the kicks on his own. As tempted as he was to point out how useless they were, Katsuki couldn't risk Deku taking offense to the ordered trip to the arcade being cut short. Next to catch their attention was a two-player fighting game. Mineta bowed out, taking the opportunity to ogle a girl leaning over a pinball machine, while Katsuki and Kaminari picked characters. Katsuki went for Endeavor, but Kaminari beat him to it. "Sorry, man. He's my main." All Might was selectable, but the one rule of any fighting game was to never pick All Might. Whether it was Street Heroes or Hero Brawl, All Might was always the OP character, tanking every hit and punching like an 18-wheeler in return, moving far too fast for a heavy hitter to boot. Hawks always had a terrible matchup against Fire, so instead, Katsuki settled for Best Jeanist. Kaminari took an early lead, roasting Katsuki with a long-range barrage. But once Katsuki got a hang of the controls, he darted through an opening and landed a punishing combo. Not letting up the pressure, Katsuki pressed Kaminari's character against a wall until his health bar emptied. "Ah, I thought I had you," Kaminari complained as he fed more money into the machine. "Hey, Mineta, you're up?" Not wanting to learn another control scheme, Katsuki stuck with Best Jeanist while Mineta went with Mirko. Surprisingly competent at the game, Mineta leapt behind Katsuki and dealt a powerful kick, knocking Best Jeanist into a stack of crates. From there, it was a slaughter, as Mineta strung combo after combo, while Katsuki struggled to get a hit in. The whole battle left Katsuki in a fit of apoplectic rage. Mineta smirked at Katsuki, but his giddiness evaporated before the fire in Katsuki's eyes. With a panicked glance at Kaminari, Mineta swallowed and said, "Good game, Katsuki. You did great." "Like hell I did," Katsuki snapped. Any other time, he'd have shown Mineta his place, but he couldn't, not when Deku might hear about it. Taking a deep breath, Katsuki said, "Kick Kaminari's ass so we can move on to something else." Kaminari was thoroughly trounced, with Mirko smirking under the flawless victory screenshot, one foot on Endeavor's chest as he lay unconscious on the street. The next game to catch their attention was the dance pad, this one with room for 4. Mineta argued for one with Bustagirls dancing in the background, but Katsuki swiftly vetoed him, settling for a hero-themed song. Once again, fate left him with impeccable styled Best Jeanist, dancing with a soulless stare. Kaminari, to his joy, got Endeavor glaring as he two-stepped, while Mineta scowled at Edgeshot folding himself as he twirled. Yet again, Mineta proved himself better than he had any right to be, practically leaping between each button on the floor. But this time, Katsuki gave as good as he got, matching the smaller teen step for step. Kaminari, meanwhile, got hopelessly left behind, the crowd booing as red lights blared around Endeavor. Not even half the song went by before he got the game over screen. As the dance wound to a close, Mineta's eyes darted between the two scores. Making a quick calculation on his odds of surviving another victory, Mineta fumbled the last few steps, lowering his score just enough for Katsuki to pull ahead. Noticing the intentional fumble, Katsuki glowered as the screen announced his victory and Best Jeanist stiffly bowed to the invisible audience. "Next time," Katsuki growled, "don't hold back. Got it? I'm not going to take some lame-ass victory." Sure. Got it," Mineta hastily said as sweat dripped down his face. As they made their way back around the arcade, the rock hero setup caught Kaminari's eyes. He dragged Katsuki and Mineta over, claiming the base while Mineta scooped up the microphone. Katsuki settled into the drummer's seat and gave the light, plastic sticks, an experimental flip. They were attached to the rest of the set with wires, but he could tap out a beat well enough. Predictably, Mineta went for a song from a high-profile all-female band, but Kaminari and Katsuki both shot down the easier pop song. Kaminari steered them towards a higher difficulty hard rock song. Nodding his head a few times to the beat, Katsuki drummed out his part, missing the occasional tap when the wires got tangled, but quickly getting the hang of it. Kaminari tackled the awkward fingerings and fast strumming with ease, not dropping a single note as he jammed out on the cheap plastic controller. Mineta, while singing at the right intervals to score in the game, had a voice that made nails on a chalkboard sound like an orchestral symphony. His voice screeched and groaned like a saw cutting a block of iron in half. Puberty had clearly kicked his voice box in the balls, but from the way he winked at two passing girls, he had no idea how terrible he was. With their high score, the game offered them an encore. Katsuki grabbed Mineta by the scruff of the neck and plopped him in front of the guitar, telling him on no uncertain terms that if he ever tried to sing in his presence again, he'd personally see to it that the balls below his waist would be the same color as the ones he had for hair, and added that it might bring his pitch high enough so it'd be inaudible to the human ear. Suitably subdued, Mineta strummed the guitar while the computer took over the vocals. Mineta's fingers were too short for the more complex fingerings, but they were able to limp their way to a second finish of the song. Thoroughly gamed out, Kaminari and Mineta drifted over to the ticket games, mindlessly mashing buttons and pulling levers to squeeze tickets out of the machines. Katsuki went over to the skee ball. Years of practice let him sink all but one of the balls in the highest point target in the top left corner. A few fistfuls of tickets later, Kaminari had a temporary endeavor tattoo. Mineta was nursing a nosebleed and clutching a mini Midnight doll, cleavage and skimpy costume included, and Katsuki had a wad of candy to gnaw on while studying for the night. The games alone had wrung out Deku's 5,000 yen, and they hadn't even gotten food. Not that Katsuki would complain. He'd sooner fork over his entire wallet than grovel at Deku's feet for more spending money. The arcade had a dining area off to the side, bedecked with hero paraphernalia from the hottest new heroes. A full-sized replica of All Might's costume hung behind glass in one corner, along with a signed, framed photograph of Hawks with his sidekick, a pair of jeans signed by Best Jeanist, and a box of Wash's favorite detergent. The menu featured greasy food of all kinds, from takoyaki and carriage to cheese curds and French fries. Mineta and Kaminari argued back and forth over what to get, but once Katsuki got fed up with listening to them squabble, he ordered them all pizza. They got a table with a good view of the television, and to Mineta's joy, a table of 4 chicks just far enough away to not notice him creepily staring at their chests. Kaminari started a conversation about what kinds of songs they would play if they got a band together. Mineta half listened, throwing out apathetic comments as he kept his eyes on the other table. When the pizza finally arrived, Katsuki regretted not coming sooner. A cheesy, greasy aroma wafted from the pizza, mingled with the scent of oregano and fennel in the sausage. He pulled a slice towards him, smiling in appreciation of the thick, gooey strands of cheese that stretched out as he brought the slice closer to his mouth. The crust was thin and crunchy, the sauce tangy, the cheese divine. Even Mineta was roused from his perverted thoughts, pausing to stuff his face full of pizza before turning back around. The girls eventually noticed Mineta's peeping, though how it took them half a pizza for them to get around to scolding Mineta was beyond Katsuki. He watched the trouble unfold, first as startled glances at Mineta, then hushed whispers upset and angry enough to reach Katsuki's ears. Finally, one of the girls stood, drink in hand, walked over to their table, and towered over Mineta. Her fingernails glittered with flecks of silver, though whether it was nail polish or a quirk was anyone's guess. "Excuse me," she said in a snippy voice, "but it's rude to stare. Please stop." Mineta gave his biggest shit-eating grin, much to Katsuki's inward exasperation. "Sorry, but I couldn't help myself. Not when you've got such a nice rack." Katsuki rolled his eyes, swearing internally. Judging by the scowl and embarrassed flush on the girl's face, that comment did not have the intended effect on the girl. She drew herself up even higher, using every inch of her heels to look down on Mineta. "You're such a pervert. Leave us alone before I tell the manager." Mineta's smile faltered, but even though he had already hit rock bottom, He was determined to dig himself even deeper. "Hey, don't be like that." He squeezed one of the balls on his head and said, "Why don't you take a seat next to me? I'll let you touch my balls." The girl's eye twitched in agitation. She upended her drink over Mineta's head, spilling it all over his bulbous hair. The liquid ran off, not leaving a single drop on Mineta's head, but splashing onto his shirt and the table. "Here's what I think of your stupid little balls. I wouldn't come near you if you were the last boy on Earth." She gave a snarky laugh and said, "Try again when you've grown 2 feet and don't look like someone stuck balloons on a clown. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to get the manager." Not wanting to deal with the manager, or worse, end up with Mineta being expelled for sexual harassment, Katsuki quickly stood up. "Excuse my idiot of a friend. He's really desperate because of the way he looks. Leave the manager out of it, and I'll make sure he doesn't bother you again." Mineta gaped open-mouthed at him, alternating between anger and worry at Katsuki's ominous tone. The girl sneered at him. "Oh please, I bet you were checking us out too, you pervert." Anger boiled up in Katsuki's veins. As tempting as it was to call her a bitch, Deku's threat held him back. He felt the window for a comeback closing, and in a moment of desperation, he said, "Nah, I'm not impressed. There's way better in my class, and she's far less shy about hiding what she's got. Probably because she doesn't have to wear a padded bra." Kaminari hooted in laughter as the girl sputtered and glared at him. His outburst had even caused a stir at the girl's table. "Oh yeah?" the girl said, sputtering. "Well, I bet she gives such a show because she's a slut." Katsuki shrugged. "So what if she is? Not like I care." The girl was spinning her wheels at this point, but she was determined not to lose ground. And I bet even then, she won't let a dirty asshole like you anywhere near her. Where did you get those clothes, Walmart?" The girl's own clothes seemed expensive, if the tacky design was anything to go by. Katsuki surreptitiously dug a finger into one of the pizza slices, coating his finger in a dollop of pizza sauce. "At least I don't get mine out of the dumpster out back," the girl gasped, and her face reached an even deeper shade of crimson. "I'll have you know, this shirt is in Uwabami line top and cost over 20,000 yen. I bet it's worth more than your entire wardrobe." Katsuki flung the sauce while she went on about how valuable her shirt was. The dollop landed just above her waistline, and she didn't notice. Kaminari bit his lip, stifling another bout of laughter after he saw what Katsuki did. "Really?" Katsuki asked once the girl was finally done. "I figured it was a cheap shirt since you got sauce all over it." "Good for you." The girl's eyes widened as she looked down, finally noticing the gob of sauce. She clenched her hand, and her nails grew visibly longer and sharper. "You did this, didn't you?" she asked, holding up the shirt to the light. Mineta leaned down, trying to peek up her shirt. To avoid further trouble, Katsuki flicked him on the forehead, forcing him to sit upright. "And waste perfectly good pizza sauce on someone like you?" Katsuki asked as he wiped his finger clean on his pants. "Wouldn't dream of it. Now, I suggest you get that cleaned off right away. Tomato stains are hard to get out of clothes." The girl's eyes darted between Katsuki's hands, which were greasy, but not stained with sauce, and Mineta, who was rubbing his forehead where Katsuki had flicked it. With an irritated huff, the girl turned and strode towards the bathrooms. The other girls left their table and followed after her. Once the girls were gone, Kaminari let out the laughter he had been holding back. "Dude, that was awesome. Way to show her who's boss." Mineta, on the other hand, was ill-pleased by the turn of events. "Hey, why did you have to butt in? I was getting my moves on." Katsuki loomed over him and gave him his best, "Irritate me one more time and you die" scowl. "Those girls had every right to call you out, and I'm impressed they had the balls to confront you about it. If they hadn't been such snobs and called me a pervert, I would have probably let you get in trouble. Heck, I would have even helped them." Katsuki really hoped that Deku didn't consider heck a swear. And if he did, then what the hell did he expect from him? "Still though, that was really cool," Kaminari said. "I could barely keep from laughing while she was going on about her shirt when you got sauce on it." "Whatever. Let's finish up and get out of here before they get back. I don't feel like getting kicked out of this place." They each took a slice, washed it down with the last of their sodas, and made a beeline for the door. As they left, Katsuki caught sight of the girls leaving the bathroom. The one with glittering nails glared at him before turning away. It was still early in the day, and Katsuki was worried Deku would take offense if he called off the arcade trip early. So when they came across a park and an ice cream stand, he suggested taking a seat at a bench. Not ones to turn down free food, Mineta and Kaminari accepted the ice cream bribe. They sat down with their frozen treats and watched people walk by. "Hey Bakugo-san," Kaminari said once he finished his ice cream. "Mind if I ask you a question?" "Shoot, why did you start hanging out with us?" Mineta's attention was pulled away from the woman he was watching. Katsuki felt his stomach drop. "What do you mean?" Katsuki asked, hoping to buy time and think of a better answer than "Deku blackmailed me into hanging out with you two losers." Kaminari looked away and nervously scratched the back of his neck. "Well, the first couple days of school, you were, well, how should I put it? An asshole," Mineta said, bracing for Katsuki's imminent anger. Kaminari cringed, but he didn't contradict Mineta's words. "Well, you swore at basically everyone, called us all extras, and tried to murder the first student you fought against." "Well, I think so. Anyways, not really sure what happened there. Then, one day that all, I don't know, went away. It's not like you were a completely different person, just different." Kaminari sighed and tossed the soggy ice cream wrapper in the garbage. "I don't know, it's just weird. I guess what I'm saying is, I don't know what's going through your head or why you're hanging out with us. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm glad you invited us out and I had a great time. I just want to know why." He couldn't tell them the truth, and he doubted an outright lie would hold up. As Kaminari struggled to put his thoughts together, Katsuki pieced together exactly what he could tell them. "I got some advice," Katsuki said carefully, "about how I could be a better hero. They suggested that I find someone to hang out with, and well, they suggested you too." Katsuki cringed at his own words and waited for their reaction. Kaminari blinked, taken aback by the answer, and looked down at the paved path. "Well," he said with a nervous chuckle, "I don't know what I was expecting, but it definitely wasn't that." "Yeah," Mineta shouted. "You used us." Katsuki cringed and felt his blood boil at his reaction. It wasn't his fault that Deku was making him do this. What the hell did they want from him? Kaminari took a deep breath. "Well, I mean, I guess I don't mind. You did just treat us to arcades, lunch, and ice cream. And, well, it's not really a bad thing that you're trying to reach out to people, even if someone told you to." Kaminari looked at Katsuki and smiled. "You were honest about it too. You could have just lied or gave a vague reason, and instead, you told us the truth. You're really not mad?" "Nah. Explains a lot." Kaminari smirked. "They also told you not to swear, didn't they?" Katsuki scowled and asked, "How the foo? How do you know that?" I dunno. Maybe it's because you have to stop yourself from swearing every sentence?" Kaminari tentatively put a hand on his shoulder. Katsuki frowned at it, but didn't shove it off. "Look, it's weird, and I don't know how to feel about this whole thing, but you're clearly working hard to be a better person. I guess, well, I don't mind being your friend. You're not easy to hang around with, but you know how to rock, and the way you stood up to that chick was awesome. You don't have pay to get me to hang out with you. In fact, next time's on us." "Us?" Mineta asked. Kaminari elbowed him in the ribs hard enough to make him double over. "Yes, us, unless you feel like sitting alone at lunch." Mineta scowled, rubbing his bruised ribs, and said, "Fine, next one's on us. I still don't like it, but I guess it's fine." Kaminari said, "Let's not talk about this again, all right? From here on, we're friends, and that's that. Deal, Katsuki-san?" Kaminari held out his hand, waiting for Katsuki to take it. Katsuki didn't know how to react to the sudden kind gesture. Half of him raged at the weakling taking pity on him, playing the part of being friends for his sake, and the other half was confused, didn't understand why Kaminari wasn't angry, didn't push him away for basically using him, like Mineta said. As Kaminari's smile faltered, Katsuki took his hand and awkwardly shook it. "Deal," Katsuki said through gritted teeth.
Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. If you found this video entertaining and thought-provoking, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-ifs coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious, and keep embracing the power of imagination. Goodbye everyone.